that. I have the Sql Fiddle. This is a little kind of, it's an online kind of simulator for a database simulator. And so it's kind of a little hokey. It doesn't work 100%, but I think for what we're trying to teach and what we're getting at, it's a great learning tool. And so I'll give a quick intro also on data model and database design. I think that's important as well because, sometimes, and if you've played around with tools like Tableau and all sorts of other ones, or Power BI and things like that, or even Excel to a degree, they're all underlying basis of SQL and things like that, right? And so, especially if it's relational databases, obviously there are now an influx of non-relational databases, but the focus of SQL is on the relational side of things. And so we'll talk about creating the tables, how to insert data, and update data. I will show you these things are not necessarily skills that that you'll always do when you're learning SQL. It's more of the querying and all that kind of stuff, but I still think it's important to kind of understand it, right? Also show you my sample architecture of what we do and where we use SQL within our architecture at Firmax. Some final thoughts, and then we'll have some. So I'll move along and we'll go here. So what is SQL? So I'm guessing most of you know at least what it is that basically it's a structured query language. It's been around, I think, for 40, 50 years. And it's basically the standard language we use for relational database management, right? So you use it to extract data from a different database. Now, traditional databases it used to be like Microsoft SQL Server and Amazon, and it was on-premise and Oracle and things like that. Now you've got a whole slew of on-cloud RDMSs, not just SQL-based ones, but also the ones we'll talk about, like AWS, RDS, they have that. That's cloud-based, Google Cloud. AWS also has a data warehouse one called Redshift, and we're actually using that. We have a hybrid approach at our company right now where we have some of our data warehouses on SQL Server and some is actually on AWS Redshift. Cloud is where everything seems to be going, but the database tech language is still the same, whether you're doing it in the cloud or whether you're doing it in on-premise. The SQL statements are relatively similar, right? And the syntax. Now the syntax within the databases are different, but for the most part, it's similar. It's like, but the base understanding of the language is very similar, but there might be some little syntaxes that are slightly different, right? Standard commands that you probably heard about: select, insert, update, delete, create, drop. Those are the types of things, and obviously those are the types of things that we'll talk about today. So that's kind of what SQL is. Now, why do you want to learn it, right? Now, obviously, from job skills, I think it's a great skill to have, especially if you are in the industry and you're trying to get, let's say, in the data analytics space, right? And I think SQL is one of the 20 to 30% of jobs I saw. I've seen different statistics on this, but definitely it's one of the most mentioned skills. Now, obviously, Python's another one you all hear about, I'm sure. In fact, Daddy was asking, can someone teach Python? And maybe we'll be able to do something like that. That's another really hot skill. 1.4 times, though, as many averages. And SQL is pretty, has a little bit more. Now, for data analysts, and same with R, too. But still, Python and R are good. It's just showing the magnitude of how many job applications, even if you just Google SQL jobs, so many come up. Now, there's different varying degrees of what levels you required and what levels you'll actually use and why you need it for a particular job. Sometimes it's just understanding. Sometimes you won't even really be using it very much, but it's still good to have. For data analysts, definitely, I think it's one of the #1 requirements that you would have. I've seen it in a majority of odds. I've seen it in definitely even in our, when I look for hiring, I'm always looking, if I'm hiring a junior person specifically, I'd like them to at least have had a class on SQL. They don't need to be experts, but at least have some understanding of it. That puts them ahead. In fact, the most recent person that we just hired was actually at our front desk. And she was hired as a mat lead, and she was in the biotech. She had done some biostatistics, but she really wanted to get in the data field, and she was having a little bit of trouble trying to get in. And so she actually got the job as our front desk person. And with talking to Sarah, our HR person, she was able to say, hey, maybe I'd like to learn a little bit of data stuff. So I knew my team would need another junior analyst soon. So we kind of trained her half the time while she was on the front desk. And now she's actually, happy to say, after a year, she's actually full-time, and she's amazing. And she's been really learning a lot of things on her own. But she did have a small fundamental basis of SQL. That kind of helped her do this. But other than that, she did biostatistics, so she had a math background and things like that. But it's not like she was like a SQL guru or like a Tableau expert or anything like that. She also just got her Tableau certification as well. So it just goes to show you that, and it's just nice to have, I think, on that end. And I think it also helps you understand. And then I always, like I said, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I've seen so many different business intelligence tools out there in the markets. And they all are using SQL in the background for relational databases. And in some of them, you can, if you know it, rather than just dragging and dropping sometimes, it makes more powerful if you change your SQL script statement and you understand how to build your own queries and things like that in the background, and it'll help your report or really help you understand how to tune a report and things like that. And even in Excel for simple if conditions and things like that, it's also helpful as well. And pivot tables and things like that. I think it helps you understand what's going on also in the back as well. I laid out a little bit of a career development path here. Not path, sorry. Just if you're interested in the data and analytics area, what are the different types of jobs and where does SQL kind of fall into it? So I kind of look at data analyst as the kind of the first level. Now, it's not necessarily like everyone has different paths. It's not necessarily going to be data analyst, ETL developer, it's some of them. And I know probably a lot of people are enticed by the idea of data scientists. I know about 4 or 5 years ago, there was, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but 4 or 5 years ago, there was a big thing that, it's the most, impressive job in the world, and everyone wants to be a data scientist and everything like that. There's all these different camps that you can go on data scientists. And I'll talk a little bit about what the skills are required for that, because I think people underestimate that a little bit. Not to say that those other, like a data analyst job and the business intelligence, I think there's so much room and so many opportunities out there that if your skill set doesn't meet the data scientist skill set, there are other opportunities. And I think people sometimes get hung up on, they're like, I want to be a data scientist. Well, so I think, the data analyst piece, I think is a great start. Obviously, it's nice to have a little bit of statistics background, data visualization. If you use tools like, Tableau and business intelligence tools or Power BI and things like that, yeah, that's helpful. And obviously presentation skills. I think actually I know it says nice to have, but I think it's actually a really important one. I think you have to be able to, talk to people and share your insights and things like that on what you see. So SQL, Excel, critical thinking, critical thinking actually is a big one, right? Like being able to problem solve and really understand the data and things like that. It's really important that way. So that, and then another path that sometimes even start, you can probably, depending on the skill sets that you have, is I kind of talked a little bit about data warehouses, right? And now data lakes and cloud data lakes and things like that. And what's happened is about, for the last for 20 years ago when they were developing it, and for a while, still now, a lot of people have, either on-premise data warehouses or they have data warehouses in the cloud and things like that. And one of the heavy lifting of how you get data into your databases is usually done by an ETL developer, or was done by an ETL developer. And that was usually pulling information from, relational databases or mainframe databases or flat files into a more structured kind of what they call denormalized to a degree data model where, then you would have some sort of business intelligence tool that would sit on top of it, and you would be able to, do all this types of analysis. And tons of companies still have that. We have a data warehouse and things like that. And you use these ETL tools, which are kind of drag and drop, but but also in the back end is SQL. So again, if you know SQL, strong SQL is really required for a traditional ETL developer, for sure. You really need to understand that. And tools like AWS Glue and Informatica, which is the older tool, but Fivetran, they have all these different types of tools, and it's a very drag and drop kind of way. However, there's been a little bit of a shift, in the sense that people are now kind of getting involved in like more of, pulling unstructured data or pulling data that's not necessarily relational. And they need to bring it into a relational data area or into the cloud. And they need to make it real time. And they need to, so that's when the data engineer has kind of actually come up. So, people use those things interchangeably, but there is slightly a different skill set, because I feel like with an ETL developer, you don't necessarily, programming helps, but you don't necessarily need to know Python or Scala or things like that. But you really have to be a strong programmer if you're a data engineer. You have to understand APIs. You have to understand all that. In fact, I actually did a lot of ETL development, but I probably, and I've done some of the data engineering to a degree, but I kind of am that type of person who relies on, the tools in order to do that. But luckily, I have a great data engineer that has all these, Python skills and things like that, and understands AWS and the new environments and cloud computing and things like that. And there's so much on the market that you'll see, like, there's another one that people have, if you follow investments and things like that, Snowflake, which is actually like, they're like, oh, we're a cloud data warehouse. Actually, it's AWS on the back end. It's a big competitor to Redshift. And so anyway, that's the ETL data engineering. I hope I gave some explanation on what the difference is between the two, but both, and you'll see jobs for both of them, to be honest, right? I don't think, people said, oh, it's ETL dead and data engineering. Now, if you're a data engineer, you can probably be an ETL developer. If you're an ETL developer and just know ETL skills, you probably can't be a data engineer. So it's obviously those skills, the Python skills, but not to say that that's, there's still plenty of space in here if you just want to be a SQL developer and you're not interested in learning Python, or you're not like a strong, procedural developer, but good with data extraction and things like that. So then, now on the BI side of things, so now you also have you need the person to write the reports. Now this, I tell you, is a little bit of a, definitely it's where, like, in the other one, like the data engineer and data developer, you need to really have a hard skill set. Whereas I'd say the business intelligence, data visualization, one of the two most important skills are, you need SQL, but you also need to understand what the business is trying to do. Businesses will never tell you, oh, I need a report on this. Well, sometimes they do, but they're more looking for, I need to know this and that, right? And then you have to translate those requirements into a report, a data visualization, a presentation, whatever, and then give them some insights to go from there. So I almost see the business like a data analyst. I've seen a lot of data analysts that end up having a dual job between like a BI developer or a data visualization expert and a data analyst. I've seen that so many times, or they grow into that role. And that's kind of the path for those types of people who start off as data analysts, and then they really enjoy the report development, and they really enjoy the digging in and analysis. And there's so many data visualization tools. They're not necessarily data scientists. Now we'll get to that in the next step, is what's a data scientist. So, in the data analytics world, the data scientist is usually the person, and not necessarily part of the data warehouse team or the data lake team or whatever, but they are the ones who are, trying to, in business intelligence, you're always looking at the past. Whereas in the data analytics and the data science piece, you're trying to predict what the future is. Using machine learning and, statistics to do that. So when I'm looking for, I've hired 2 data scientists, I get like 400 applicants. I'd say 50 applicants actually have the skills. And this is where I was saying is that you have to be very honest with yourself. Is that, okay, and you'll see in the next slide is that, everyone wants to be a data scientist, but I think there are so many, like I said, is that, and not to discourage anyone from that, and you definitely, if you have the ability and you want to learn these things and you have the time, or if you've already had a degree in math and you've done statistics and probability, you're probably a really good fit because you'd be able to learn, programming and Python and things like that. Because I would say the really things that I look for is definitely the statistics side of things, and I look for the programming, the Python. SQL is there too. But if someone says I'm a super strong SQL person, I kind of know a little bit of statistics and I kind of know a little bit of Python, I probably wouldn't hire them as a data scientist. I probably would hire them as a data analyst though, right? Or a business intelligence developer, but I wouldn't. If they were strong on the statistics, strong on the Python, and knew a little bit of SQL, I would say, yeah, I would definitely consider it because I think they could learn. And usually they would know that. So that or data visualization, they have some good experience with that. And I have a really great data scientist right now who is kind of like a combo between like a BI visualization expert and a data scientist as well. Sometimes some data scientists, all they want to do is do predictive models, right? They just want to do, like they want to predict models, and there's a lot of math and statistics, and some are okay doing a little bit of both. So that's kind of the high level there. Now, the other thing with SQL is that, just looking at time, the other thing with SQL is that, a lot of web developers and software engineers, people who are building our platform, we have a separate team that actually manages the development of our product. My team basically takes care of all the data analytics to support internal businesses within, or business units within Firmex. But definitely all the developers, all the QA analysts, all of that, they need SQL, but they need also a bunch of other skills as well with .NET. And then other roles where I think it'd be helpful to have, but not like you need it for sure, is like the financial analyst, business analyst, sales operation analyst, marketing analyst, any sort of analyst. It'd be helpful. Not always required, but definitely if you're a data analyst, you probably that's what they would want you to do. So I hope that kind of gave you a little bit on the career side of things, and we can have one question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So this is actually, I pulled this one I thought was really interesting because it basically said, so look at the data scientists, right? It's like programming, visualization, data intuition, statistics, data wrangling, machine learning, software engineering a little bit will be helpful, and multivariable calculus. Whereas look at the data analyst, really it's like, okay, programming tools, which is kind of like SQL, data visualization and communication, you need testing, data intuition, statistics would be help, it kind of help. But I think you can then get into it with a little bit of a couple tools, couple SQL, all that type of stuff. And then definitely, definitely a data analyst could grow into a data scientist. I know people who've done that as well, right? They've taken their time to kind of learn about statistics and stuff. They start off as a data analyst, and then they spend a couple of years to kind of get to that level. Both of my data scientists that I had hired, one had a PhD and the other one has had a master's in mathematics. And data engineer, yeah. So the data engineer programming tools, and I think we covered that. Data wrangling, that's like the extraction of data, manipulation. That's essentially what your job is when you're doing that. And that's what I said, software engineering. The new data engineers need to be like developers. Okay. So now let's get into the actual SQL part of things. And then maybe we'll go through a couple things with you guys on that. And then so really, I pulled this. I thought it was a good slide because it basically talks about the different, commands that you would see inside of SQL. So we're not going to go through all of them, but you'll hear people talk about DDLs and DMLs and I haven't heard DQL as much, but DQL is essentially that if you are an analyst, that's what you'd be doing. You're going to be basically executing a bunch of select commands, but in a different way. So different commands in there as well. But mostly, like if you look in the back end when you run a Tableau or a Power BI report or any sort of business intelligence tool, in the back end they're doing SQL, right? And a lot of it's select statements. Rarely would you be doing like creating tables inside of the Tableau environment. Like the tool doesn't do that, or doesn't necessarily even insert data and things like that. Now, the creation of the data, the DDL language, a lot of the times is done by database administrators. Sometimes now, like some companies, they don't even really have DBAs necessarily, but they basically, some of the developers will just end up creating tables and maintaining them and all that type of stuff. And then, like I said, the querying of the data is the select commands. And then the data manipulation, I said inserts and things like that, insert commands and updates and deletes. Chances are, if you're a data engineer or if you're a an ETL developer and you're in charge of loading data into a data warehouse or into a data lake or into any sort of database and things like that, you're not just writing a bunch of insert statements. If you're doing testing in QA, you probably would be working with a lot of insert statements, but you would be, connecting to all these different systems. And inside of that, you'd be doing some select statements from different, data sources, and then you have some insert statements within them. But it would all be kind of very automated code that would be doing that when you're creating processes. But now with streaming data platforms and things like that, it's not always insert statements that's loading data into different databases. And then the DCL grant and data control language, that's more for data administrators as well. So we're going to focus on like the insert and the updates and the deletes and the creating of the tables, just so you can see how it happens. If you we'll give a little bit of a hands-on and doing it yourself. And then there's a data query language, which is that thing we'll do a couple of test cases. Let's go through a couple of scenarios on how you can use different select statements. So we'll move on. So like I said, I'm a big Toronto Raptors fan, and so we're going to pretend that Masai Ujiri hires you as a scout, or not as a scout, as a consultant to help out with some insights on an NBA. So obviously this is a very simplistic problem, the way we've been doing it here. But having said that, I know, and I don't know if you know this, but the Raptors have a huge they have a really big emphasis on data analytics, and they have a huge amount of data that, and I think they've been doing this since 2014. IBM sponsored them with a bunch of technology and things like that that they use and they collect. And they were one of the first. Now the NBA itself is actually collecting all the different data on where someone's just shot the ball, like everything. It's all about analytics now when it comes to that. In fact, the guy who owns or the general manager of the Houston Rockets has had a computer science degree, right? And so actually a new coach, the first female coach for the Raptors, assistant coach Brittany, I forgot her last name. She was she was actually their data analyst, and now she's a coach. And she has basketball experience as well, but definitely a stats background in data analytics, and she was on the data analytics team. And I know they definitely rely on a lot of analytics to kind of make the decisions, but both for to run their business, but also to run their basketball coaching, kind of like how they kind of handle that. So what we're doing here is we're just going to have like we're going to pretend that you're like a DBA and a data engineer, that you build your little data warehouse and data lake, and we're just going to create a small DDLs to create the database schema, and then we're going to load some data in. So like I said, what we do at my company is we use a lot of tools, ETL tools, or we have also some Python programs that grab data and insert it on a regular basis, because you don't want to be running SQL scripts manually on a regular basis to insert data and things like that. But sometimes in order to do testing, it's a very powerful thing to be able to kind of create your own little environments. If you need to test certain data and things like that, you can do that. And that's what just from a learning perspective. And then obviously the other thing we'll talk about is we'll go through pretend you're an actual analyst. And the analyst is the one who's doing a lot of SQL statements and do some simple questions about the data set. We're going to use this simulator called Sql Fiddle .com, and we're going to go through that and show you. When I get to that, I'll give you some time and you can look at it. But the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to show you, and actually one of the roles that I had said was a data architect. or a data modeler. And so before you kind of get into the whole SQL side of things of running queries and things like that, a lot of the times what happens is you have a data modeler or a data architect who designs, especially on the analytics side of things, not so much if for data scientists, because data scientists don't like structured data as much. But if you're looking for business intelligence for reporting and things like that, the trend was that you would create what they called data warehouse. Now, and what that is that, and I kind of mentioned that before, is that the difference, we have all these online systems, right? Online transactional systems. And a lot of those transactional systems feed our data warehouses. And the data warehouses is where all the reporting and the analytics happen. Not analytics, and reporting and things like operational, strategic reporting will happen against that using all these different types of tools, whether it's Tableau, whether it's, what other BI tools that these different companies have. And that will allow them, to make decisions and things like that. And so it used to be that you really needed to have your data model designed in a particular manner. So before, in the OLTP systems, or not before, you'll still see lots of systems that are designed this way. When you look at their data model, they'll have hundreds and hundreds of tables. And because they don't have just one table and one structure for a bunch of data, they really what they call normalize their data models. So they have a bunch of tables with that. Now that, from a reporting perspective, 15 years ago wasn't, and still now isn't really good. So they wanted to kind of have a centralized location where all this information from all these different source systems can sit. So hence is the data warehouse. And they have this thing where when you design a data warehouse, you have things called dimensions, and you probably see this in Tableau and things like that, and you have metrics, right? So you have what they call a center, you'd have a schema, which is the design of your data model of your database, which is just a graphical representation of your database. Because in the center, you'd have what they call a fact table, where all your metrics are stored. And then on the sides, you would have all these dimension tables. Our data model is a lot bigger than this. In all the companies I've worked for, it's also, we've had that. Now what's happening is people have realized now, I guess, with the power and the tools, you don't necessarily have to, so this is what you call a star schema. So you don't necessarily have to have a star schema. It's still a lot less tables and a little bit more denormalized than the old OLTP transactional systems. But now what they do is, because this type of data for data scientists doesn't necessarily structure data, they don't need to see it that way. You can see it like in a little bit more of a raw format. And you can combine these tables together, and that's when they've now started to do that, and they call it a data lake. So I've seen the differences. I've seen like the evolution of the data warehouse to a data lake. But people, were concerned, saying, "Oh, is that no one's using data warehouses anymore," and all that type of stuff. And it says like, no, people are building both. Degree, we kind of have a hybrid model of data warehouse / data lake, right? And so this is again a schematic, is a visual representation of your database, right? And actually, I'll quickly, and I put this as a tool. Now we don't. I'm not going to make you guys go into try to do this, but this is essentially like where your data modelers and your data architects would kind of live. They would live in a data modeling tool. Now the great thing is I just found this yesterday actually, or a couple of days ago, that we have an on-premise data modeling tool. But this is like, basically you can, build your tables, and it also generates the actual DDL code, which is the code to actually create the tables. And that's been going on for years. They've had these data modeling tools for a long time. And that was what I was mentioning, was one of my first jobs was I was actually going into the model. It was a lot more of a cumbersome tool back then. And I would put in the descriptions, because you want some metadata. You can create reports out of this to say, hey, when new people want to join, and they need to understand how the data is structured, because you'll see like tables and tables for systems in companies, enterprise applications, and things like that. So you need to understand what is you'll see here, and I'll talk about this. Is like, if your concept is primary key. So a primary key is what uniquely identifies a table, right? A record inside of a table. So, it usually player, in this case, I have player name, right, as the unique identifier, but really maybe it's player ID. Sometimes what happens is sometimes you have a combination of different things that makes a record unique, right? And, and so if you're in the health industry, for example, it's your healthcare number, your first and last name or something. Usually your healthcare number is unique enough to identify you. But let's say you didn't have a healthcare number, they didn't have your healthcare number, then it would be, or it was because of security reasons, you weren't able to cure that. It would be like first name, last name, date of birth, and address or something like that. And that would uniquely identify you. That can be, and sometimes you'll see in some designs, you'll see just a system generated ID that is used to identify the record. And then you'll have what they call a natural key, which are what are the actual keys that actually also naturally identify it from a business perspective. Because an ID is just an ID, right? It doesn't, you can't really, whereas, a name, what's the date of birth is the natural way. So in this case, the way I designed it is I have a player name, which is kind of a natural way of identifying the player. And then also on the other side, what season it is. So and you have a code and a description of the season. And then I have a field called Is Sql. So it's all the descriptive information that you want to analyze your core metrics against. That's what a dimension is. The demographic data, a lot of the times you'll see very similar types of dimensions. You'll see now it's funny because I remember when you used to build, whereas you'd have to build a time dimension, but now most tools, they already have a built-in time dimension. So they have date year because that doesn't change, right? And so that's already built in a lot of these tools, but we used to have to build it ourselves. And so, what are you looking up against? In this case, I have player. You could also have team as a separate dimension and have more information about that. And so in a data warehouse, you have a couple tables, or let's say this would be like 6 tables, but maybe in a data lake, it would all be combined into one table. The reason why before they would separate it was because of redundancy of data. Because can you imagine if you have so many players and so many records in the one table, then what would happen is when you have season, and you have to have season description and things like that, if someone has one player has 15 different seasons that they played in, then you'd have the description for every single record and the bubble year for every single record in this main fact table here. And so that's why they split it up. But now because space is a little cheaper and there's so much of it, people are a little bit okay with combining data together. So primary key uniquely identifies the key. Then you have the foreign keys. So what they mean by a foreign key is the relationship that exists in one table. And so, for example, you have all the players right here, and the player name is a foreign key it also exists in the player metrics table. So there's a relationship between the player name for this table, the player dimension, and the player metric. And so the key that joins them together, the join key is that player. And that's how you would, and it helps when you're SQL. So this is a tool that you can play around with. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Okay, so if you have questions, can you please put the questions in the question box? If any question related to this data analytics SQL going on, or the previous explanation on career paths, please load them up into the question box so that we can help you address those. So there is already one. So if the person is asking if you don't have a previous experience in data analytics, if you don't have a previous knowledge of programming, but still want a data analytics career, what's the path for you?
So if you feel like you don't have programming experience, then what I would suggest is to learn something like a SQL, right? To spend the time learning SQL, and then your path would be learning tools like a Tableau and a bit, or Tableau Public. You can actually go online. You can look at that. And that is a great way to start. So I'll go back to that slide that I said here. So you would definitely be positioned in this data analyst role if you feel like you're a critical thinker and you have you played around with Excel and you feel comfortable in that. Learning SQL, learning Tableau, I think that's a feasible. That's what I always tell people who are just wanting to start, who don't have necessarily a programming background. I think that's the great start. And you'll see tons of jobs for data analysts, but definitely you need someone who critical thinker, but SQL. If you have some extra time and you want to learn a little bit about statistics and things like that, you can go ahead and do that too. But I would definitely focus on learning SQL, learning Excel, learning about the business maybe that you're trying to apply in, and also maybe a couple of those reporting tools. Or even go online to see what are the types of jobs in your area, or if there's a particular industry, that's also helpful as well. Does that answer the question?
Do we want to take a 5-minute break? Is this the point?
Or do you want me to, there's a couple more questions. There's 3 other questions. You want me to
Absolutely.
Finish?
You can keep going on, and when you want to have the break, please take the break.
Let me finish these ones, and then so here's it. The first one was, and I'll read out what you had said. The first one was what if people that don't have prior knowledge of programming? Yeah, so that's exactly what I had said beforehand. Learn SQL, learn some of those tools on BI tools. There are lots of those free, like there's so many classes now that will teach you about all this stuff. I mean, we'll give you a basics on SQL here, but I mean, you can take that further, right? And you can play around how these tools and learn. And what I also find is really impressive when I get an applicant is that when they create their own little project, if they don't have experience, because that's also the problem, right? Someone's like, I learned it, and then they battle someone who's had the experience. So volunteering can be helpful, but sometimes it's hard to even find volunteer jobs, right? It's sometimes like, trying, people say network and connections, but, maybe it's also like building, your own little database and going through it and learning and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's helpful. So on data analysis, if you have knowledge about Power BI, where would you recommend we get a remote job in order to get better experience? This experience, yes, absolutely. I mean, to answer that question, I guess with the pandemic right now, people are probably more willing to hire people remotely, right? So I think if you have knowledge on Power BI and SQL, just start to I think I would and I don't really have one resource to go to and things like that, but I think consulting firms are good places to start. Boutique consulting firms that specialize in Power BI. Maybe what I can do, Addie, is later on I can provide a list of, and not companies that I know are hiring, but a list of companies that I know are looking for BI analytics kind of people. I can even there's a company called Adastra, which they're a consulting firm, and I know sometimes they're looking for people with Power BI or SQL experience and things like that. So there are a lot of boutique consulting firms, and then there's just regular banks. And if you search online and you have to look for something that's remote, but I wouldn't be afraid to, if you have the skills. I'm hoping that people are more open to it, and I don't know for sure though, because I still think it's been a while. We'll see as time goes on. Also depends, and I'm guessing the time zone. It depends on where you are, but I still think that shouldn't be a deterrent. But I know maybe that could be one. Addie, do you have any insight on that? On people applying from different time zones into North America and challenges that they have on that?
I don't get the question.
So the person had asked about the remote job, right? Like where you recommend to get remote job to get experience. So my question is, have you had people come to you saying that we've applied from another country, remote to apply a quote, but we never get anyone responding to us on those guys? Is there a challenge? I'm guessing like if you're not living in the country of of um, of where the job is. Because I still think even though everyone's saying there's a lot of remote work out there, obviously, I just don't know what the hiring practices have been. We've started ourselves because we always used to hire people from Toronto, right? And now I think they're starting to look outside, but still, I'd still say that they're kind of preferring the Toronto piece. So I don't,
Well, I think remote job has different categories here. If you're trying to get a remote job from outside of the country, usually if it's a full-time job, your employer may still be obligated to report taxes and all of that.
yes, yeah.
And then immigration stuff will also have something to play because immigration will ask if they can't find anyone in Canada. Is that why they're sourcing this job out? They have to be able to prove that they've advertised for 6 months. There is no one picking up the job. So that's why they're sourcing out. All of this play a role into getting a full-time remote job. Or at least there are opportunities for part-time remote jobs that I've seen that people have gotten because that doesn't have any immigration constraints usually.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. Okay. That's good. Yeah.
And then the other for 20 minutes, Uchi is here with you to continue. I am giving a presentation at another location for about 20 minutes and I'll be right back.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
I'll answer a couple more and then we'll take a quick break. So are there data analyst roles for beginners? I think there are. I think there are. Again, you just have to do some Google searches and see. I think there definitely are. But having said that, I mean, it's good to see if you can get, some experience. Sometimes people are always looking for volunteers in different. I don't. I have to see where to point you out on, but definitely, I think there are roles. People are, especially smaller companies, are looking not necessarily to spend a bunch of money on sometimes. So if you are willing to have a starting salary, then sometimes that goes better. Like we've had that situation before where we want a junior person. We don't want a senior person, but you also do have some places where people are very particular and saying, I need someone with 5 years experience, blah, blah, blah. But I think they're out there. My suggestion is, banks are good places to start careers at. Insurance companies, banks, but even in the software industry now, you're starting to see, companies, smaller companies that are hiring for those roles, right? I think what I would do is Google online and see what sort of, technologies that they're asking for, and if there's particular interest in a particular type of company, or if you see okay, I need SQL, I need that, you can check mark and make sure you have those, and then maybe create a little bit of a project on your own and say, hey, I've done this, and then if they're pretty clear on whether they say it. Okay, so that's that. One other thing, so we're having a bunch of questions. My question is, I want to understand more of a clear difference between data analysis and data science. Okay, so I guess one of the things I would say between the biggest difference is and some people expect their data scientists to understand statistics, but if you're a data scientist, I expect you to be able to really understand statistics and be able to create what I call a real predictive model, right? And if you Google predictive model and a data analyst, the expectation is you're not creating predictive models, right? You're not necessarily. I mean, maybe some are. You could use tool sets in order to, Tableau has a prediction analytics where it does all the background work, and you have lots of data scientist tools that I think the data analyst could use. But I would expect that the data scientist would be able to make their predictive models using programming and not these store out of the box tools that would help them build machine learning. So fundamental difference that I look as a data scientist. I'm expecting them to gather. Data analyst is also looking a lot of the times at the past and sometimes using a little bit of help to kind of predict in the future, but more the data scientist is looking for predictive models on that. And so an example of a predictive model is I would expect my data scientist to come up with a model to tell me and predict which customers are going to stay with us and which customers are going to leave. What would I expect from a data analyst was I'd expect the data analyst to tell me can you analyze and figure out what do you think, like based on the data from the past, what people have been, how they've been churning and things like that? Like, what do you think the predictors are? So that would be information for the data scientist to actually make the predictive model, but it's not the expectation of the data analyst to do that. Now, maybe some companies do, but that's the key difference I would say. Does it allow, how do you make a foreign key? How did you make a P key via an F key? Yes, it allows you to do a simple drag and drop for sure. Yeah, you just basically drag it in. Oh no, so sorry. Once you, how did you make a P key, a foreign key? So what you do is, I'll see if it works. Let me share my screen here. Is that, how did you make a P key, a foreign key? So it's kind of the opposite. I need the foreign key, a P key is what I did. So what I did was I brought in this, so I dragged this in like here, and then what ended up happening, now actually that didn't work the way I wanted it, but I was able to do it so that actually move this on here. And I'm going to put this has and if you see now, if I delete this from here, and then I drag it in here, so the player name becomes this. Then you click on this, you edit it, and then you bring it up. You can bring it up here. Oh, okay. I'd have to get back. I was able to do it. Let me see. Okay. But you should be able to do that though, because it brought it in as a foreign key. I'll have to play around with it. Sorry about that. Okay. Does Python give me a leading edge in understanding SQL better? No, it doesn't give you necessarily a learning and understanding better in learning SQL. No, but it would give you a better edge in jobs. Yeah. So like, then you could start to go into the data engineering type of world. And it kind of gives you, and even from a data analyst, it makes you a much more powerful one, right? If you do have Python, but it's not necessarily a requirement for the analyst position, but it doesn't necessarily help you learn SQL better. You will use SQL probably in your Python code. Is there an Android app? I'm not too sure if you can use Sql Fiddle on your mobile. Yeah, I'm not too sure, but you can try it, but I'm not too sure. Let's see, so another one. Got it. Okay, drag and drop still works. Okay. Okay, Uchi, do we want to take a quick break?
Yeah, for sure. How many minutes?
Do you want to do like, what's good? Would you guys, 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes is good, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. Uchi, did we have an end of time here? Because I'm just looking at my calendar. I think we're pretty good. I probably think we could probably go to like 2:30 is probably where we're at. Did we want to end at a specific time?
No, that's fine. Like we scheduled for 3 hours, so that I think 2:30.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we started at yeah. Okay. I think that's great. We might yeah, with questions and things like that, we might be able to keep going.
Awesome.
Okay. So I'll be back in. We'll do a quick 1:20, or we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
I'll just stop sharing.
Okay, so everyone, we're going to be back in 5 minutes. That is 1:20 Eastern time, and I believe 6:20 West African time.
Okay, I am back. Are we good, Uchi, to continue? Oh, there you go. I guess we'll wait till 120. That's what it said. 120. Okay, we can start. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
are we good,
Yeah,
Yuchi, to start? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. So another person asked if slides will be available. Yeah, I can share that with Uchi and Zaddy, and we can have them available. I'm curious for the person, and you can maybe, saying that is challenge. Okay, sorry, I have knowledge of BI and Power BI and Excel, and I've also been teaching myself some models in machine learning. But getting a place to intern has been in other to apply things has been challenging. What can I do to keep developing my skills? Well, where are you located? I mean, the reason why I asked that is maybe you don't have to answer that, but is if you can find something, locally, a list of companies, maybe on LinkedIn and things like that. It is challenging when you send an email to someone on LinkedIn, because I do get this sometimes, like, hey, I'm interested in interning, and I don't always have the time and to kind of say, hey, we to do that. Our company has done it, and I know they have that. I wonder, one of the things, and I'm not saying, people who, or maybe if you're graduated, it's hard, but I always say if you are in a college or university, you can get the co-op positions, co-op degrees, I find are very helpful, because the co-op programs, if you are in university and if you're in college and things like that. The other thing is, if you are in universities and things like that, sometimes there are lots of organizations that are looking, that's the other option, is you can find smaller organizations, like even maybe like small organizations, maybe nonprofits that need some technology, and maybe try to find a problem. I think that's the other thing, is like, technology is one thing, but I think if you're solving a problem, a business problem, then that would be more beneficial to someone. Say, hey, I can build this for you, and it'll help you do this. I know it's tricky, but if you do see that and say, like, especially smaller organizations, that's another thing, is sometimes they don't have anyone doing particular things or reports and things like that. You can say, I can do this, rather than saying, I'm willing to learn. I think some people, then I think if you provide some sort of value, then they'll be more willing to kind of look into that. Okay, let's see. I guess we'll go. Let me just make sure that I answered all the questions, and then we can go from here. Okay, awesome. So I'll share my screen. Go back to this. So we were. Yes. So we basically, I think, yeah, we talked about primary keys, we talked about foreign keys, we talked about dimensions, we talked about facts, talked about, you know, one of the other things, we were in that tool, we talked about the difference between data warehouse and database. So yeah, so we went through all that. Now it's like the SQL piece. So, so my suggestion is this. So what I will do is I actually created a script already. So this basically says, this is the first thing that a database administrator would do. Again, it's a very helpful thing for you to have, but one of the things you would do is you create a table. And inside the table, you basically specify the names of columns of that table, and the parameter, data parameter specifies the data type which the column can hold. So whether it's varchar, integer, date, etc. So those are all the different things. So my suggestion is what I did was for this whole data model that we had, I actually, you know, a lot of these tools now actually generate the code for you. So you don't need to, and that's been going on for years, where they actually have a generation of code. And so you don't need to, you just kind of need to execute it. Now, sometimes it's like a little finicky, some syntax doesn't come out the way you like it, or something like that, and you have to make some changes. I even found that when I was doing the test for this, that did that. So let me just do this, and I will send this script to people. What's the best way to share this, Uchi? It's just a bunch. Should I just put it in the chat or something?
Yeah, the chat works.
Okay, so I will put this in the chat. Sorry, just going to get the chat piece. Okay, here it is. So what I will do, we'll see if this works. Just want to make sure. So this first piece actually, not bad. Two notebooks. So I've done it in two ways. So we'll do this one first. This is basically creating all the scripts, and I'll walk through what it is, and then you can execute it yourself. Rather than, I mean, you could try to create the table yourself from the definitions and things like that. But I'll just give you that, and then you can see what it's like and what I've done. Let's see if that works. Ooh, that didn't seem to bring everything in the chat. Did it cut off up the chat there? I wonder if there's a way of sending a document, or can you attach a document anywhere?
Would copy and paste work?
Well, I tried that and then I didn't. Okay, you know what? I'll break it up into components. So, because I think what's happening is it was just too big. So, what I'll do is we'll do the first three tables. See if that works. If that doesn't work. Nope, that did not work too much. Okay, I'll do the first two tables then. Okay, so what I'll do first is we'll build the first two tables. So we're going to build this. I think this would work. Let me just make sure. Yeah, that looks like all the code is there, I think. Yeah, I'm going to send it now. Okay. So that, if you can copy and paste that first piece, now what you do is, so you just copy and paste that first piece of code. And the first thing you do, now I'll have to be honest here, this Sql Fiddle, I think they call it Sql Fiddle for a reason, because you have to fiddle with it. So I find it to be a little bit of a annoying, but I think it's good for what we're doing. So what I would do, the first thing is I'm going to try and see if this works a couple times. What we're going to have to. So I already have all the data here. I've already done this, but what now I'll do is, so you go to sqlfiddle.com. So we're going to just try it from scratch here. Go to SQL Fiddle. So then what the first thing you have to do is you have to choose the database that you're looking at, right? So choose the best thing is now it's funny. I tried the SQL Server, but it doesn't look like it's working. It was working the other day, but then today it wasn't. Or yesterday it wasn't. And so I tried it. I'll try. So just the first thing you have to make sure you do. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure you choose SQLite Web Excel. So then what it will do is then it'll set you up for SQLite Web Excel. So then copy or Control V, put in what your code is. Let me explain the first two tables that we're building here. One is this player dimension. So these are both the dimension tables that we had in the data model, right? And so inside of that, we have a name, we have a team, we have the position, and we have the age. Now, obviously, we could actually probably have this all in one table, but I'm trying to explain to you and showing you how you would see different models within an enterprise environment, or that you would sometimes see data structured, right? And so, it's important to kind of to see that. It's just one example, but that's what it is. And so, from a definition perspective, we have the name of the player, we have the team, the position, and the age. So the names are all bar charts, so they're all characters. What means by not null? Null is basically a database language. I would to say like it's not zero because zero means something. Null is just a definition that databases use to say that this data has no data in it. Right? And so rather than saying zero, because zero, it's or nothing, you can't say it's essentially nothing, right? So now obviously a player should have a name. Now you'll see in a lot of data quality issues, the reason why they put, not null, these not null meaning that they're making and enforcing that you can't insert data that has no data for that record, right? So if you try to insert a record that has no age, they won't allow you because we've defined this as not null. And so it's interesting because nulls can create problems. And now sometimes it's perfectly valid for simple types of data, so fields, to actually have null data. And that's okay. So you have to just define it like that. But if you know, for example, like there is going to be, like if there's data quality issues in your source data that you're pulling from, you may have to, unfortunately, make some fields, and you probably will, make them nullable, which is perfectly fine. We've got lots of fields like that. But sometimes it's really bad when you have to make something that you know shouldn't be null, and then you have to make it nullable field. That can be challenging. That's like a data quality issue, sometimes out of your control, if you're like on the data design team or something like that, right? So then when you define your table, you define the primary key. I've seen this in some places, so it basically defines what the unique record is, right? And in bigger tables and things like that, you might create some indexes. And what an index does is it's more on a performance perspective. Now, a lot of these like AWSs and some of these other, like people still hire DBAs, which are database administrators, and what they do or they manage. But a lot of these softwares kind of say, oh, you don't need a database administrator for this and all that and stuff like that. But I still think it's it's still, I've seen a lot of companies still have them and they need them and things like that to manage environments. And they are, the ones creating the tables, sometimes looking for loading the data, but usually creating tables, managing it, and all that stuff. So this is just simple two tables, and you see them there. So just to test that this works, the way this works is every time we're going to add to it, you'll have to rebuild your schema, but that's okay. We don't really have data in it. Like that's not really good. So now what's happened is you click on the build schema, and then you go to the browser, and then you'll see that your tables have been created. And so we go back to the DDL editor. And so what we'll do is we'll build on we'll build on this script, and then we'll just keep creating build script. And so this is where the way this tool is working is the DDL, the data definition language, and I think the DML, the data manipulation language, is also on this side as well. The querying goes on the right side. So does anyone have any questions on this piece? Let me just go to my screen here. chat. Sorry, I'm just trying to. Oh, okay. Q&A. Okay. Anyone have any? Oh, so. Okay. If you don't, yeah, Sql Fiddle. If you don't have any, then we'll put in the next one then. So the next piece then. Thank you, Chief, for putting the Sql Fiddle.com. And then the next piece here is we will copy and paste the player metric piece. So in this case, and then we'll see if I can get the indexes in here as well. So we'll add that to the next part of the session. See if I can get it in the inserts are going to be up me because they have all the. Okay, that did not work well. Okay. I'm going to have to do this in two pieces. So what we'll do is first piece. Yeah, so I'll send this piece first. So that's one. And then the second piece here is this. We'll do this at the end here. Okay. So, yeah, so if you can combine, yeah, so if you have the chat, you can copy all that up from the player metrics piece and copy that into your SQL. So I will go into your SQL Fiddle, and then you'll do the same thing. You'll just add the, so where are we? We're at the, yeah, the player metrics. So now what we've added is the player metrics is like the fact table. So in data warehouses and also in data, and you'll see this sometimes, is that they'll have all the, and even in Tableau, you'll see metrics or Power BI or sometimes even in you know, Excel when you create a pivot table. So the player metrics are all like, you have the natural key and you also have, sorry, the natural key identifying it is player name and season code, because you could have player, you know, Kobe Bryant in season 2018 data and 2019. The data is split up by the seasons. And so then you have, so you would have, you know, records for Kobe, you have Kobe Bryant 2018, and then you'd have all his statistics there, and you have Kobe Bryant 2019, and all the statistics for 2019 season, obviously, so he never played then. But yeah, so that's what you would do there. And then you would have, there's the constraints on here, so they put the foreign key constraints there. I see in the places of large enterprise data warehouses where they actually don't put the enable the foreign key, because what the foreign key does is that when then happens is when you try to load data, you can test this into the table, and it has a player name that is not in the player name table, it won't let you load that record. But in real world situations, sometimes what happens is it's weird if you're getting, let's say, reference data, and for some reason the reference data doesn't come in at the same time as all the metric data comes in, and that does happen. That you don't want to necessarily stop the data loads for the metrics if you know the person, but you don't have all the demographic information for that person. You want to continue to load it. So that's why you wouldn't enforce it. So if it was just one raw table, it would just be left as blank. But in this whole structured form of data warehouses, sometimes what happens is that's why people like sometimes the data lake approach, because you just throw the whole table in. If there's no data in there, it doesn't create problems. So that was always a challenge. So you have to make sure you don't put those constraints down. But then later on, you still want to do data quality checks to make sure that the person does have some of that demographic information if you need it, like if it's required from your business. So let's build this event. So again, so now we look at our schema, and that's there. Again, so you have the player metrics in there as well. That's all the data there. Now there are like, proprietary softwares like, SQL, like I have for my own, at mine, we use SQL Server. But we also have AWS Redshift, and they also have its own, so I actually, if you notice, I actually have both of them up on my display because I have SQL Workbench, which connects to my AWS Redshift environment, and I have SQL Server, which connects to my SQL Server environment. And so I use the different tools in order to, if I'm going directly access against them. But if I need to, like, the reason why these tools are really good, like the Power BIs and the Tableaus, is you can create an environment where people don't necessarily, like end users, like business users who are just trying to look at data and just trying to make decisions on it. They don't need to like go into SQL. You don't want them doing that. So they go in Tableau, and the underlying end of it is it connects to all these different data. But to them, they don't know. Most of our end users, we have about 40 people using our BI platform. They don't know that, but they don't know where things are coming from. So, okay, so that is that. And let's go back to, I think there was one more thing in the that I wanted to show you guys, or not show you, that I wanted to put the index on there for that last piece there. So that's the I think we already created, we actually don't really need to enforce. Okay, you know what? We'll enforce the season code. Yeah, do that. So what you'll do, so many windows open, and just losing the chat here. Okay, got it. I will. I'm having problems with the chat. The chat, sorry. It's things open here. What I can do. Do you know the okay, I'm just trying to get the,
Sorry.
I'm having problems finding the chat on my screen here. It's not too many. Because when I go to chat,
Yeah,
it's not bringing it up.
do you have do you have double monitors? Or can you minimize the browser?
Oh, I had it. It came up, but then it
Okay.
lost it. Okay. Wait. What did you say? Sorry. You can
So if you
minimize
the browser window
Yeah.
from the right.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try that. Just a second. Oh, there it is. Came up.
Oh, you found it. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so then we already have that one index there. That's the player name, and then we'll just put in the season code. So we can create, if you can create the season code, that would be good as well. So yeah, so the season code. So if you can then go back to your Sql Fiddle and you put that on. Thank you, Singh, for putting someone put gave a link to some of the resources. I actually have that resource for someone who was asking about some of the resources, W3 schools. I actually have that in the presentation as well. So if you want to look at that after too. So we go to the DDL editor and then just copy and paste that in again. And you can go in from there and build your schema again. And now we have the whole schema is actually built. And so we've got, we've got all the player metrics, we've got everything kind of in there as well. So that's basically how you kind of build your model from that perspective, or the database itself. So that's the create piece there. So I'll go back to my screen there. When you can see my Sql Fiddle, right, Yuchi? When I go from between the presentation, you can see that, right? Okay, cool. Just want to make sure I know some screens. Okay, so the next piece here is how do you insert data? And so really the way that you insert data is that you have your table name and you have the column name. So the way that they specify it is there's two ways. You could put, if you're only going to insert into like maybe 10 columns out of like a 30 column database, then you put in value 1, value 2, value 3. And then you can put it that way. Or if you're inserting all the data in for all fields you're filling in, then it's easier. You don't have to put column 1, column 2. You just put values. Now in the real world situation, you're probably not manually doing this. Although for testing situations in QA, I've done this a lot, where you insert records just to test certain test case scenarios that your data processes are working properly. Usually what happens is, this is going back to my first thing about the ETL piece, is that, and it's also nice to learn, there are some resources that you can look up, I know Microsoft has some free kind of ways of learning, it's just a good, like SSIS or some of the or even Fivetran. I think you can get a free trial of that. And you can learn how to create mappings by mapping data from one source to the next. And that basically in the background does inserts all the data and creates all the insert scripts as well. And so that's a cool way of creating some, drag and drop kind of programming in order to insert data. Otherwise, you can also do Python and learn how to use Python in order to insert data from one source to the next too. And this is great too. It's like I use this once in a while just if I need to, like I said, for test case scenarios. I know a lot of QAs use that, where they're inserting data a lot into inserting that. So for our model, what we'll do is we'll quickly we'll jump to the next. Actually, I'll just send you the next in the next chat. I'll send you the insert scripts. So what we're going to do in the insert scripts is we're going to basically insert some data in. So I did put in a bunch just so that we have enough to kind of play around with and have some test case scenarios. And actually, you can then play around with it yourself as well, because this is all it's all public data too, right? Because it's from NBA.com, and I just downloaded the script on that. So you can do that. So, but for now, and you can we'll do that piece. So let me go back to the chat and let me just quickly put that in there as well. See how. So here's this insert. Okay, so what I'll do is we'll just start off at Eric Bledsoe, the last guy there. Okay, and then I'll put in one more. So let's do this as well. So what we're doing is we're inserting data from into this table called the player dim table, which has all the player demographic information. So we have bowl, and then all the way down to sorry.
So we're not seeing your screen. We're seeing
In chat, are you seeing it in the chat though? Because I'm just putting it inside. Yeah. So just take that script that's in the chat, and then you can start to put it in your SQL Fiddle. But just give me a sec after I just have to put a note, because the chat you can't is limiting to the amount of data that you can put. So now what I'll do, put in everything from the chat in there. And then we have all the data. Okay, so then, yeah, so copy and paste all the inserts, all the insert data that we have. Yeah, so we can see what you're doing. Okay, so go into SQL Fiddle now, and then make sure actually there is, I think, so I will copy, so basically copy and paste that code that I put in the chat, put that in there. I think I have to, yeah, I have to get rid of these here. And we should have all the data set there now. And so now, so the thing with this tool again is that you don't just run, like usually a lot of times in SQL scripts, you don't have to keep rebuilding your tables. But the way this kind of tool works is that, you know, you do have to do that, right? Like it's just the way it is. So, you know, so it inserted the data. Now the way you can quickly check is, you know, we'll talk about the actual syntax, but the main syntax, or one of the things that you probably use a lot, is you use the word select star, or select something from. So, you know, just kind of to get ahead of, you know, some of the questions that was asking. But so let's say I loaded data here. So what we basically did was we created all the tables, obviously, and then we just loaded some information for one of the tables, the player dim. So you can then actually just do a quick select star from player dim. And you can do it on the right-hand side, and you can run the data. And so if you see, it has all the different data. So I can actually jump, you know, to, actually, you know what? I will, we'll continue with the insert, and then I'll explain the select a little bit more. But yeah, so as you can see, the data has been loaded. Now the other thing is, what we're going to do is we're going to load the other pieces of the data as well. So we also have the season data. Sorry. So I'm just going to copy and paste from my sheet that I have here. And probably you're going to lose me probably for a second here. Or I just need to put it in the chat. There we go. So yeah, this is just season data. So basically saying, you know, go back into your SQL Fiddle. And again, now we've inserted, sometimes a lot of times when DBAs do this, or database people, they like to put comments in, and they like to save their scripts, because you never know when you have to rebuild it and all that. So what I'm doing here is basically putting just some information. Now I did something on purpose. And so watch what's going to happen. We're going to get a failure. And the reason is, remember how we built those unique constraints? The last thing was basically it's telling me that I cannot, the unique constraint that when we defined in the database was that 2020 for the code can only exist once in the season, because you're not going to have 220, because it's just it's not demographic, it's information about the season 2020, right? And so you can't put it in, you don't want to have two records that have the same. So that's why we have that constraint in there, and now, and so it didn't allow you to put it in. So what we do now is just delete one of them, right? And then you can build your schema. And so now we've now got, so now we've got the two main dimensions data. has data in it. So we do a select star from player dim, it's still there, right, the data. Then we do a select star from season dim, and it's there. And yeah, and then the last piece is we have the fact table. So let's see, well, we haven't put any, the metrics, we haven't put any data in that yet. So if we did a select star from there, it'd probably be empty. But now what I'll do is go back to the chat and I will give you guys the last piece of information, the insert data. And so this is just what you'll probably see here is so this is your insert data. Big leg, so is what we want. So there's one, and then we start with Volvo, we go to, okay, another one. There's a lot of data here. And actually, you know what? It looks like I'm giving you duplicated data here, so ignore that. Sorry. That's all the old stuff. So you don't want to put that in there yet, actually. Sorry about that. You just want to do the player metrics piece. That was my bad. So we just want to get up to the player metrics table. That was my bad. So starting from here, I'll just so now up till OG and an OB. So yeah, so just take the data that says insert, because you probably have the other stuff. Is that not, don't do the player dim one, do the stuff that says player metrics all the way, and then look at the next there. Yeah, and that looks like hi, and that looks like we should be able to put all that information in there. So let me then copy that, all that into my piece here. And then you can try to build a schema from that. You click on build, and there you go. So now we've got all the data. We've built all our data. We've built all our schema on that. And so we have everything we need in order to kind of do, we created our data. Now we can start to actually create data. Now, like I said, in real world applications, you probably, if you're an analyst, you're probably not loading data. But if you're a data engineer, you'd be doing types of this type of work for sure, but not maybe using scripts. But you might sometimes need to do it. Did anyone have any questions on that before I start to go into the querying piece? Okay, good. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Okay, so what we'll do now is then I'll move over to talking about I'll quickly talk about inserts and updates. Now, again, I have some resources stated below. We won't probably go into the insert update, the update and delete pieces, or we won't do examples of it. But essentially, what you would do is, if you wanted to do it, the syntax is essentially, update the name of the table, and then you set column equals to this value, and then you set column 2, whatever you wanted to update and whatever value you wanted to update it to, and with any sort of condition, you follow that. And same with the delete. Now, the funny thing about the delete is, if you're deleting it can take a lot of time sometimes if you're deleting data from and obviously too, unless you're in QA or testing, you have to be careful with that permission. Now, sometimes you wouldn't even have the permission depending on your role. But if you don't put a where condition, you could delete the whole table, right? And you never want to you can get yourself into trouble by deleting too much data. And there is a way in a lot of syntax where they have, it's not shown here, but where you have what they call, you begin a transaction and you can commit. So what happens is before you write the delete statement, you put begin transaction. Then you run the delete statement. And then what ends up happening is, let's say you realize that you made a mistake. So you can type the word rollback, and then it rolls back to what the original state was beforehand, right? Because, and then if you want, you're good with that you're fine with that delete statement, you type the word commit. And so depending on what GUI interface you're using, some of them have a default to auto commit. So you have no record, so you could mess things up. But other times, places you has not auto commit, you have to type the word commit every single time. And you can, depending what interface you are using to connect to your database, sometimes, but obviously if you're using Tableau or BI, Power BI or something like that, you're not going to have the ability to delete data. You don't have to worry. So I really liked this piece. So, I pulled this one here was basically selecting column 1, column 2. So I think this is a real good way of, when I want to query data, basically you have your main thing is select, then you have the names of the columns that you choose, or you can use what I was doing, star, right? And star means all fields, right? And then you have what they call from the tables. Now, what I'm going to actually show you is I also have when you want to join tables together, that's not really shown here, but the syntax, I'll show you that in another slide, is how you join tables together. And then the other piece that you do here is you aggregate data. So a lot of the times you want to know things like you want to sum up data, or you want to group it, you want to find the maximum of something, or you want to find the minimum of something. So you need to do that, you need to aggregate, or you want to find the average. SQL has functions for those, and so that you can do that as well. And then if you need to limit that in the aggregation, you can use what they call a having clause. And that basically allows you to filter based on that. And then the last piece is you can also order. You can do an order by. So order by is just sorting. It's sorting data, essentially. So what the join, so one of the big things is, so I think we went through that, and we'll go through a couple of examples of this as well. But, when you're querying the data, you have like the inner joins is basically when you're joining two tables, and it only will select data where if you're matching based on whatever column you're matching the data on, it'll only select all the records where there's a match between both tables on the field that you're joining. So let's say, for example, in the player to the player metrics, there is a player that's in the player dim table, but is not in the metrics, that they don't have any metrics related. It has demographic information, but it doesn't have any of the metric information. So what will end up happening is if you do an inner join, it will not work. You will not bring back, will not work. You will not get any data back at all. In some cases, you actually want that. You just want I only care if there's metrics involved in this player. I don't care if the player exists, but there's no metric data on that. That's not helpful to me. But maybe there is some situations that you do want that. And so in those situations, you would use what they call the left join. And a left join or a right join. It all just depends on how the syntax you use. But basically what that would do in the left join is it would return all the records on the left-hand side, meaning table 1 here, because it's left. And then it would bring in all that data, and any of the data, what would it do for, like, if you bring in column names from table 2, it would just blank them out. It would put a null there because it doesn't exist. So for example, if Kobe Bryant had a demographic information but didn't have any metric information, all you would see his name, his position, and his age, but you wouldn't see any of the metric information there. And that's called the left join. And the same thing you would do with right join as well. right? If you want to flip them around. So actually, like I got most of this, and I have a couple cheat sheets and things like that, but there's a good resource here. It's called this thing here, and it has all the information, all the different syntaxes, because we went through a couple, and we'll practice them, but it tells you basically where I copied and pasted some of that the syntax, but it basically tells you. It's a really good tool. Yeah, there was another one I put, but this is a little bit more in date, and you can into data, and it basically tells you all the different conditions and syntax. And then this piece here is all the database kind of things like that we were talking about, whether creating primary key, whether creating constraints and all that type of stuff. And then this side here is all the stuff that you would need in order to query the data. So going back to our, our SQL Fiddle and our challenges. What we'll do is we'll just do a quick kind of couple things, just to kind of help understand like what the queries we can do. So it's saying right here, what is the age of OGM and Adobe? So what we would do then is you would go into your SQL setup here, and you would say, okay, so the first thing you would want to know is the demographic information about the age is all in the player dimension table. So is that all the question is asking me right now? If I go back to the question, yeah, it's saying, what is the age? And so that means I don't need to do any join. All I need to do is, but let's say is basically go to this player table, and then maybe rather than, you could do let's say there's thousands and thousands of records. This is where you need to do the filter. And the way you filter something, like I was talking about in the slide, is you use the where condition. And you will see this in a lot of tools where you can choose, and even in Excel, is where you basically choose a filter. And that's what we call the where condition. It's a obviously very powerful command. And so you would say where player name is equal to, and I'll go and just make sure I have the right spelling. And I will like that. Now, rather than doing a select star, is sometimes what happens again is that you need to be careful, because if a table has, some tables will have like 17 columns or maybe like hundreds of columns. So you don't want to necessarily look at all of them, because if you're downloading it to an Excel file or you're sending it out to someone, maybe there's some information if someone's asked you or wants to create a report that you don't want to give that other information out, right? You're not allowed to, and things like that. So you can just, again, what you do is like part of the syntax going back to the slide was, remember how it said select column 1, column 2, ... from table name with the filter clause where player name equals OGM. So then you execute the age and name, and it basically comes out here, player name. Did we want to give a couple seconds for people to play around with this on their own and then see if they have any questions on it, or do we want to just keep proceeding? What do we think?
Yeah, except if someone has a question, maybe we can answer the questions. I see just two questions, and I think you've probably answered them already.
Okay. Yeah, I think I already did. Yeah.
So maybe we can continue.
Yeah, because we answered a bunch of them before, so I think that's probably we had a bunch before. Okay, so sorry, we'll continue back to the query then. Going back to the next slide, is how many points did Bol score in 2020, and how old is he? So this requires basically you to have, when we're doing this piece here, is what we want to do is we want to basically join player, the dimension table, right? So back to, you know, the other thing I like to do sometimes is I like to, if I'm trying to build a query, I like to use the data model for me to kind of understand it. Really, it's a visual representation of the data. So it's easy for me to say, okay, I need to get this field from here. Especially sometimes you have, you know, join after join in the table, and it's really hard to kind of map it out and try to get the data. And so it's really nice to look at it in a picture and to say, okay, I need the player name and I need the player age. But let's say, you know, you also had another table that said team. And then you said, and I also need to join from player dim to the team table. So it allows you to kind of have a visual representation and then translate that into your select query, right? When you're building that. But obviously a lot of the tools are doing that for you a lot of the times. That's the power of them. But, you know, like I said, with SQL. So we said player name, and then we're going to do a join to the player dim table. And then that way we'll pick up the information that we wanted. And we wanted, so let's go back here. And so it says how many, I didn't put anything here, but let's say assists per game did Bobo's score, and how old is he? So what we'll do then is in the player metrics. Now this GUI interface isn't the greatest, but some of them actually have when you put like B dot, it'll actually come up with the actual name, so you don't have to keep looking at the data model to find out, you know, what the metric is. So I know it's APG, so I can say APG. And so I didn't explain this actually here, but if you're looking, what we did here was we're joining, we have select, we're going to pick the columns that we want to display. We have the two tables that we're joining together, and we have the join criteria. So you basically say player dim aliased as the letter A. You could call this anything. You could call it, you know, R or whatever, or you could call it P because, right? And then you join this with player metrics, which is aliased as B. And then what you do is you on this criteria, and I have it set at this, is that you're joining based on the player name because that's the unique identifier of the player itself. And then you're filtering based on where player name is equal to global. And so then what we want to do is, let's say for this report we're creating or whatever, we say player name is equal to that, and then this is his average points per game. Global, and it looks like he was 0 points per assists. Sorry, not point per. He had 0 assists per game. Let's say you want to know what they did the points per game, PPG. 4.8. So that's, you know, you can look at any of those, you know, those sorts of things. So that's just the basic. What we've done now is we've done the join and the filter, right? So the first example was filter and join. Now we're doing the join and the filter. So now let's say you want to do, you know, you want to know the number of points that, let's say, a specific team had, right? So the best way to do this is you're going to need to join it to, so let's say the total number of points, or let's say total number of, let's say, average points per game, or something like that, for the 2020 season. So what you're going to need to do is, first thing is, so we know that where's the team name, right? The team name is in the player dimension. So we can actually keep a little bit of this query, right? So what we'll do here is we'll delete this. And we know we still have to join between the player dim table and the player metrics table, right? You know, we don't necessarily need to join to the season table because we already know, you know, we can use that in the filter because the season actually exists in the player metrics. There's nothing, if we wanted to know, filter like only bubble years, then we would have to join to the season written table, but we don't in this case. So what we do then now is that we basically then, what we do now, so we wanted to select the team name, right? And we want to say, let's say the metric we want is, and we want it to be, we said we only want it to be for the Brooklyn Nets, right? So what we'll do is we'll say where, and A is equal to team is equal to, the reason what is equal to, in the data. Sometimes what you have to do is you have to profile your data to see. Now, obviously, we don't have much, so but I can just see the insert statement. But you can also just profile the data to see that what the definitions. And sometimes in the data models, or someone will tell you what the definitions of what things mean. That's why it's important to have documentation and things like that, where people can go and see what different things mean. Sometimes it's not so intuitive. You'll have to, and sometimes they'll have extra tables that will actually say, oh yeah, anything that's coded as BRO is actually Brooklyn. Okay, so now what I'll do now is you're going to have to use what they call a group by statement. So the group by statement usually, so if we go back to our syntax here, and I'll go into here, is that when I was showing you the query, is that you basically do, I think, the where first, right? And then you do the join, the where, and then you can do the group by, right? Because we will need to group this by team, right? Because we want to aggregate it by the team level. And so then what we will do is we will use, and now if you look in the cheat sheet thing that I had said here, is that there are specific functions, and I have this on the back in, again, it's in the statements here, is there are specific functions that you can use for reporting aggregation functions. So that's count, sum, average, min, and max. So in this case, we're going to sum what the, or actually, you know what, we can do the average, or well, let's do sum. And so you can do both. And we're going to use that. And if you're using these functions, you have to use the group by clause. So then what you would do is sum. And so I think we had said we'll use, it doesn't really matter what metric we use, but let's go sum points per game. And then that basically so the points per game is 16.6. And that, I mean, you can double check that in your data. We actually have some each. But that's essentially, it's always good to sometimes to go back and test and see if that makes sense. But anyone that was labeled with the team of BRO that we inserted metrics into, that would be something. Now, if you were, wanting to do some other filtering and things like that, you can also do that as well. You can use the having clause in order to make the filter go back. So I think that's kind of like a high level. Like I said, I think the best way to, and I hope it gave you an understanding. And we'll talk a little bit more about. I know we answered a lot of questions already about final thoughts for resources and things like that you can do. Like I said, there's so many different resources online. I did put in the one W3 Sql. It has all the different syntaxes. I think it's a great tool. There are courses online too as well to learn more about it. There are things like in SQL Server where you can create scripts that actually do what they call stored procedures. And what a stored procedure does or SQL script does is it does a bunch of like automated data pulls. Like, so it'll select data from one data source and it'll load data into another. Now, like I said, there are tools that do that, but you can also write hand-coded SQL that actually does that as well. You know, you can practice with more complex stuff, and you can create an automated step script that on a regular basis takes data from this source and loads it in. I mean, that's more of the complicated things that you would use SQL with, because people could look at this and say, well, it seems pretty easy. It is, but there's a lot you could do with it. It's very powerful. That's, I think, the beauty of it there. The other suggestion is like the SQL. I really like the data modeling tool. I think it's really neat just to play around with. And you know, I've been talking about Tableau a lot. I know someone did a thing on Tableau as well. I think, you know, Tableau, Excel, SQL, 3 really good skills, and Power BI probably replacing Tableau, or if you want, are really good skills, and really easy ways, I think, to kind of get into the industry, to be honest. I know some people, you know, who are just specialists in Power BI, right? And that's all they do with Power BI, because, you know, or Tableau, and they're consultants, and they go to different companies, and they maybe have shorter gigs and things like that, but they're able to kind of provide their expertise, and they know that tool really well, right? And so that's always an option too. But I think the fundamentals of SQL, I think, you know, I think you could probably learn it in about 3 to 4 weeks. But I think, you know, it's if you don't know it, but I also think, like I had said before, what I think is important is that, you know, you go back to that. And I can share this with Adi later, but I think it's important, and this is also all over the internet, but like things like, you know, really figure out, if you're looking from a career perspective, if you're just learning, if you really want to get into the analytics space, you know, try to focus on those criteria. And like I said, I think the challenge is sometimes, and I don't know, you know, necessarily where the venues to get internships and things like that. You know, it is hard, but you know, I'm on LinkedIn. You can connect. You can, you know, send me a message, and I can, you know, maybe you know, point you in the right direction depending on where you live too. Like I said, I know it is a pandemic, and you know, people still tend to hire within the locale that they're at, but still, you know, you can always reach out to me. You never know. But please feel free to reach out and things like that.
I wanted to mention that we've been in contact with your HR team to discuss future opportunities for some of the people. So I think that's something that we could work with them on early next year or so, and hopefully get planned for 2020 with firm.
You know, and I think that would be great. And on my team, like, we did that actually last time, and it worked out really well for the person that we ended up hiring, where we basically, and I think, you know, yeah, I'd love to, you know, if you know, it all depends, I guess, with our HR, but if you guys are working on something like that, it would be great, you know, to have someone on my team. And we always have work, you know what I mean? And if it's internship and things like that to learn, it is. Sometimes time can be a problem to spend the time, but if you're willing to learn it yourself, then I think it's good. Like, you know, like I said, the person that I had hired, you know, one of the things she had done is I kind of gave her a training plan, said, you got to do this, and you got to do this, and you got to get this. And she ended up learning, getting Tableau certified, getting all that type of stuff. And some of the cost to even for her to kind of do that wasn't that expensive for her to kind of get to that speed. Now, she was lucky because she was already working for us, you know, partner. But, you know, definitely, if there is a partnership like that, Addie, I wasn't too aware of that yet. That would be great.
Yep, I think we'll finalize with your team, with the HR team by the end of the year, and put it for 2021.
Yeah, and you know, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And like I said, you know, I really like this, you know, chart because it kind of tells you, you know, and you know, if you, let's say you want to be a data scientist, okay, I want to learn statistics and all the things. But if you're just starting in it, I think, you know, the data engineering, the business BI visualization, and data scientists if you have the statistics. There's work for all in the industries. There's demand for all of it. But like I said, if you practice on your own, create your own projects, try to find a problem that you're trying to solve. That always helps, because the thing is like if you have a problem that that other companies are trying to solve, that would be helpful, right? And you can also present that as, hey, I worked on this project. In your resume, you would have to be very specific to say, like, worked on this project. I've seen people do that in their resumes where they might not have any work experience, but they put the project experience in there. And even if it's not something that's mandated by someone, right? They come up with their own project. And I think that I was impressed. One time I actually had someone who brought up their project and showed it to me in their interview, or asked me, can I show it to you? And then we demoed it during her meeting, which was really impressive, right? So, I think the challenge is some other people had asked questions, if I have no experience, how do I get my way? Right? And hopefully internships, if we can provide an experiment can help on that, that'd be wonderful, even more wonderful. So, yeah. I did quickly, that was kind of my final thoughts, but I did jump around. I did a little bit here. Yeah, like I said, take some time to learn the other skills that you want, depending on the career path you want to choose. And then maybe for SQL, like maybe you just want to be like, you just wanted to learn it for the sake of understanding how products work, and it's always helpful, right? Even a couple of people I know who are on my team, they don't use it as much because they're like, administrators of certain types of software, but they understand it to a degree. I guess the last piece, I know we did take a lot of questions, Abby, before, but the last piece is I did want to show you the complex of our architecture here for a small company. So we're basically pulling data from all this different area, and we load it into we call the FBI. It's the Firmex Business Intelligence Platform. And so what we're doing is we use SQL. We also actually connect from, so there's a lot of scripting going on, and there's a lot of like different tools that we use to connect to all these different sources, and we bring this data on a regular basis. And we then have, this is where the end user sits on the Tableau, the Salesforce Pardot, and the Gainsight side. These are just applications that they use, that the different business units use in order to kind of make data-driven decisions. But all the heavy lifting is happening in the phase between, like, these arrows, right? All that information where all that data engineering is going. But SQL is everywhere. Like, you know what I mean? Like every aspect, when you look at these arrows, people are using SQL. SQL scripts are running here. SQL is being used in Tableau's side. SQL is using, in predictive models. So there's so much of it going on. That's why I always think it's like, it's a great tool, like first step. And like I go back to how I started my career. I think that was the trigger point. It was when I learned that, then I was able to kind of learn a bunch of other things after that. So yeah, and then I also shared just the cheat sheet there. So, if anyone had any more questions, I know we had some already, but
I don't see an extra question in the question box.
Oh, there's one there saying, can we have access to the Google Docs file, the schema data?
Yeah, I think we will, if you pass that across to us, we will share it in the mailing list. What the team.
I'll put all the schema data files as well, and I'll share that to you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Everyone, you have received another tool to help you in this data analytics journey that some of you are on. Previously, we have taught Tableau. We've had Excel analytics class. We hope that you will be able to perfect this tool, put it in your toolbox. As Industry 4.0 becomes a thing and we'll move forward into digitization, as you have heard from Pavan, SQL sits at different points when it comes to the data analysis process. Having this as a baseline or a tool in your toolbox can help you at different points in your career or depending on which areas you're focusing on. We hope you enjoyed today's session, and we hope you will join us for the grand finale next week to hear about really how do you scale up your startup? How do you start it up in a way that will be successful? For this series 2, we would like you to reflect on what you have learned from this program. And we would like to hear from you. Send us a memo. You will also receive in an email a link to be able to participate in testimonials and surveys, so we can take this feedback and make the series 3 starting in January better. Thank you, Pavan, for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today. We're very thrilled about the possible partnership that is going to happen between FEMEX and STEM Hub, and we hope that other companies will take examples from you and really invest in our community. Thank you.
For sure, for sure. So, yeah.
Okay. Uchi, do you have any last word from your side?
No, just wanted to say thank you to Pavan. It was amazing. Thank you so much.
No problem. No problem. And yeah, really excited. And also, yeah, I'm gonna put a plug for what Adi had said for Joel's. I mean, even if you don't have your own start your business or start your own business or stuff like that, it's just an interesting talk that you'll enjoy it. It's some good entertainment too. It's funny as well. So so I think and you'll learn something in it. And I think Adi said he has lots of good stories, and I think it'd be worth that. I might even join it as well. I probably will. So.
Thank you. Well, if there are no other last words, this will be it for today, guys. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you for the grand finale next week. Please bring a friend or two. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
All right.
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.